She pushed me. He snatched the doll from me. So-and-so won't give me the keys. Center time in preschool can be so chaotic. If centers are stressing you out, then stick around because we're going to be diving into some solutions in this episode. One of our listeners has submitted a great question about managing the chaos of centers.
Hi, I have a class of 14 children. I have 4 3-year-olds, 5 4-year-olds, and 5 5-year-olds. And my question is, when you dismiss them to go to centers, do you randomly pick a child to choose first? My problem is they all want to go to either the kitchen or the blocks, and I can't have all 14 of them at those centers because it causes a lot of problems, a lot of behavior problems when there's so many at just those 2 centers. So I didn't know the best way to manage that.
So in one of my previous episodes, I discussed how I called children up to choose their centers and make a choice before then going to them. So they have to look at the picture and they have to touch the picture and say the name of the center and then go there. So that's what I'm assuming she's talking about. How do I choose which student to go first? So in this case, I usually look for the child who was exemplifying the qualities of a good participant or listener during our circle time. So we usually start with like a morning meeting and we'll, read a story, sing some songs and things like that. And I'll just casually notice something that a student was doing that was exemplifying those qualities. So I might say something like, oh, I noticed that when I was reading the story today, Jamal came up with some really great observations or whatever you want to say there. And so I could tell he was listening. I don't focus so much on, if they were sitting a certain way or had their hands in their lap or whatever, but something else that exemplifies how we want them to interact during circle time. So I'll make that noticing and I'll say, Jamal, why don't you come and choose your center first today? And then he comes up and chooses the center and then he goes. And after that, I'll call them up like 2 at a time because if you have a lot of kids, I know this caller said she had 14. I usually had like 20 to 24 kids in a typical year. I needed to call them up in multiples. Otherwise, it was going to take an hour just to get them into centers. And then I would just be ringing the bell to end centers at that point. So call them up in small groups of 2 or 3 is what worked for me. With a class of 14, you can probably call them up in 1s or 2s and you'll be perfectly fine. So that is what I did when I was dismissing them to their centers. Now, after that first child chose, or after I called out the qualities that I was looking for, then I would just randomly call them up in 2s or 3s. And usually I would go for the most wiggly kids right after the first child because they're not going to be able to wait any longer. So I called Jamal up because he was doing something that I noticed, exemplifying something, and then I'll go straight to those wiggly kids and I'll just alternate from there. So simple as that. So in this next portion, I'm going to address the comment that the caller made about all the kids wanting to go to blocks or dramatic play. So what I can take away from this comment, it gives me a few clues as to what's going on. So if indeed this caller has a Monday through Friday, meaning they meet every single day, and they also have an hour or more each day for free choice play, then that would lead me to the assumption or the conclusion, which may not be correct, that the children that are in that classroom feel most comfortable at the blocks and the dramatic play center. So at the time of this recording, where I'm recording this right now is mid-year. So at mid-year, if you're in a Monday through Friday program, your kids should have moved out of that. This is the most comfortable stage, blocks and dramatic play, by this point. So what that tells me is maybe you need to go back and do a little more demonstrating or modeling in each of the other centers to really firm up what children should be doing in those centers, what they can do, like being a used car salesman and kind of showing them, oh, and I'm going to go to the math center now. And they're all sitting around watching you. And I'm going to use these teddy bears and I'm going to do this or anything in any of those other centers that they are not visiting, right? So I'm assuming you have a Play-Doh area in your classroom, an art or easel area, and you have a sensory bin or table as well. Those should all be other high interest areas, right? So I would start off with those and show children exactly what they can do in those centers. Because when my students would go to blocks or dramatic play and there was too many, I would often say, oh, but the sensory center is open today. Have you seen what we've got there? We've got the moon sand. And I would just really talk it up. And the Play-Doh Center is also open today. All my centers were open every day, but I would just highlight them to my children and say, oh, I wonder what you could make with that purple Play-Doh we have in there this week. Things like that to kind of talk up other centers. Some other ideas, things I've done before that have helped. I will go to a different center. So not blocks, not dramatic play, because they all want to go there. I would go to the art center and I would start making a card for my mom or doing something in another center that would attract them to come away from the other two centers. If your kids are looking for opportunities to role play or pretend in the dramatic play center, then you might want to highlight storytelling, the storytelling center, because chances are you will have some little props there for them to retell stories. So for example, in some of my nursery rhyme packs, I have little reenactments that we do on Fridays. So whenever we read a nursery rhyme, which we do every 2 weeks, we change our rhyme. We would go to act those out on Fridays. And I would put little props. After we acted it out, I would put little props in the storytelling center. So for example, I had a bucket. Really, that was really the only prop for Jack and Jill. And I drew a little hill on the wall. So they would pretend to walk up this pretend hill with the bucket and they would act out Jack and Jill. When we did Three Little Kittens, I had a little laundry basket and in it was some mittens and then there was a string with some clothespins and they would pretend to hang up their mittens and then lose them and so forth. And I had a little pair of cat ears, a couple pairs of cat ears in there. That will also allow them to still be in that dramatic way, where they're pretending to be something else and acting out scenarios in a little bit of a more structured way. And that will get a few kids out of that center. Then I would have my flannel board with the Three Little Kittens as well. So then I could have, a few more kids in the storytelling center, things like that to kind of highlight them to the kids who are kind of just gravitating to what they know and what feels comfortable to them. They like that dramatic play. They like those blocks because they feel comfortable when they go there. So really highlighting and talking up or selling your other centers is going to go a long way there. Now, I could be making assumptions, but that's just something I wanted to highlight because if they're all still wanting to go to the blocks and dramatic play mid-year, I would be asking myself the question, why? Now, if this is a class that only meets 3 days a week or even 2 days a week, then we cannot expect the children to be ready to have given up the novelty, right, of these other centers. This dramatic play and blocks are still new to them because think about it. If your kids come every day, Monday through Friday, do the math from the first day of school to whatever day it is now, that's the number of times your students will have been able to play in those centers. Now take your 3-day-a-week class and do the math from the first day of school to whatever day it is now in your school year. And that's the number of times your kids have had to play in blocks and dramatic play. So do you see the difference in numbers there? It's dramatically less for a 3-day-a-week class. So the novelty is going to take a lot longer to wear off. And in that case, you're still going to need to talk up the other centers and make sure that children have some examples of what they can do in each of those centers. And they know exactly what they can do and what they can't do. So you're going to do some more modeling, right? And if you have just a 2-day-a-week class, that number goes way down. I've never had a 2-day class. I hope I never do because I can't imagine the inconsistency that causes. But your kids might never get over the novelty, of the blocks and the dramatic play. They may never get over their attraction to those because they're only going to have to play with them for a very, very short number of days. And if you're half or full day too, that could also impact things. So just know that it's normal for children to really like those centers and be really attracted and really like forceful about their want to go there in the beginning of the year. And then consider your situation and then do that math and you'll figure out where the problem is. Now, the next part of the caller's question was about having too many kids in one center. And this causes problems. And I would agree 100% with that. If you have a large class of 20 to 24 kids and you've got, 15 of them wanting to go to the dramatic play center, that is going to be really hard to manage. There are some folks who would say, well, let them negotiate the space. And I do agree with that. But sometimes when you have such a large class, you have to do what you have to do in order to make things work smoothly. So one of the things I would do in that case, so this caller has 14 students and she doesn't want all 14 of them to cause problems in the dramatic play area. So I might say, as I'm dismissing kids, I might say something like, oh, I noticed that now there are 4 people in the dramatic play center. And then the next time someone chooses that, as I'm calling kids, oh, now there are 5 people. And the next time I call some more kids and now there's 6. Oh, and now there's 6 people in the dramatic play center. What do we know about that number of children? Hopefully I've pre-taught all of this to them. We really, when we start to see 7 kids in the dramatic play center, we start to fight more, don't we? Because we don't have enough of everything to go around. And so this comes to the point of the more kids you have in a center, the more wear and tear you're going to have on your center materials. The example I use here is when I taught half day, my materials did not last as long as they did when I switched to full day, right? Because I had 2 classes in the half day program. I had an AM class and a PM class every single day, Monday through Friday, regular public school year. So 190 days. And the amount of wear and tear that my materials took when I was half day was crazy. So again, another reason why early childhood teachers should be paid more than any other grade level, especially if you have half day, because who's going to supply you with more materials when the others are ruined or broken? In public school, it's you, baby, right? So it becomes more expensive. So if indeed you have a lot of wear and tear on your materials, when you have a lot of kids in your center, it's going to be in your best interest, unless you have an unlimited budget. And I really don't know any teachers who do, but just in case any are out there watching, unless you have that unlimited budget, it's in your best interest to keep your materials from being broken. I've been in classrooms where the baby dolls have just been like they're missing arms, legs. Kids have cut the baby doll's hair. They're drawn on with markers all over the place, on the baby dolls. And it's just a mess. Everything in the dramatic play center is broken. That's a sign that too many kids are going there and they're not treating the materials well. And even if they are, when you've got 20 kids in there, it doesn't matter how nice and polite they are. Something's going to get broken, stepped on, pushed and tripped. That's how things get ruined. I noticed that the doors on the refrigerators in the play kitchens of the teachers in the public school were often broken, and the cabinets too, because there were so many kids. They would get pushed into them. You would think that they were just misusing them, but really it was just the sheer volume of children and just the not enough space in the center for the bodies that were there. And these pieces of furniture would get broken. And what do we know about classroom furniture is that it costs exorbitant amounts of money. I once joked that one school supply company wanted more for their dramatic play kitchen set than my own kitchen cost, right? Like my dishwasher and my refrigerator together. It was nuts. So just keep that in mind, that your materials do take wear and tear. And so for the caller, I would say absolutely, it does cause problems when there are too many children there. That brings me to what can you do about it? So here are some things that some teachers have done. I have done some of these things in my own classroom with success. So the first thing that I would think about in the caller's case is what I call the dot sticker method. Now, this is a method that I learned my first year in public school, and the program that I was working in used high scope. And I call this the dot sticker method. I'm sure maybe it has a real name somewhere, but it's a one dot, one of those circle dots that you'd use like in an office. They sometimes color code things that way. You get them at the office supply store. Mine usually came in the primary colors, and I would choose a poster board. So in my classroom at the public school, I had red pieces of poster board that I cut into squares. And I used red because it was a bright color and you want kids to be able to find it right away in each center. So you're going to have one square of cardboard for each center in your classroom. I chose red so that it could be seen. Now, if you have an all natural classroom, that's great and wonderful and kudos to you, but you still need something bright so they can find this card. So I've got the card, right? I call it a card. It's a square of a poster board that I cut up. I chose red. I would laminate it. First, I would put the stickers on it. So let's say for your dramatic play center, my card might be a little bigger. I like to keep no more than 6 in my dramatic play. So I would put 6 sticker dots along the bottom edge of the card. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I would space them slightly apart and then I would laminate it. Okay. So it's laminated. And now I take one spring-loaded clothespin, the kind that you squeeze and the end opens. I would write each child's name on one clothespin using a fine point Sharpie. If you use the regular Sharpie, it's just all going to bleed into the wood, right? And you need to use the cheaper clothespins because the nicer ones have a wax coating that will resist your marker writing on them. So each kid gets a clothespin with their name written on it in a fine point Sharpie. If you use all uppercase letters in your classroom, then write them that way. And if you use lowercase, uppercase, or sentence case, write them that way. Up to you. You can also write their first name on one side and their last name on the other if that's something you're working on with them as well. And then at the end, the pinchy part of the spring-loaded clothespin where their fingers pinch, I would add a sticker to represent each child because your 3-year-olds are not going to be able to recognize their name in print, right? So, and most of your 4-year-olds as well in the beginning of the year. So I put one tiny little circle sticker, like the kind you would use on reward charts. I don't use them for that purpose. I put one sticker on the end of each child's clothespin. So if I had 24 kids in my class, I needed 24 different stickers. So I would shop around for all different kinds of stickers. So I would get 24 different types, and each child gets a different one on the end of their clippy portion of their clothespin. I would then wrap that with Scotch tape because little fingers. And then when it was time for centers, I would place these little square laminated pieces of poster board with the number of kids that were ideal for each center. I would tape that to the shelving unit, wherever that center was or near that center. And then when kids would go there, they would take their clothespin off a chart. I had a chart with everyone's name. So a long, skinny chart with everyone's name. And next to everyone's name, they would put their clippy clothespin, right? So when it was time to go to centers, they would choose their center. They would grab their clip from the chart. They would go to the center they wanted to play in, and they would clip it to one of those circles. Okay? Do you see where I'm going here? And when there were 6 clothespins there and there were no more circles, then there were no more kids. And now they would have to find another center. That worked really, really well. And it really helped with name recognition, and the little stickers really helped. The one thing we did have a little bit of a problem was that the clothespins, they aren't made that well, right? So they would fall apart, right? They would become unattached. Well, my colleagues, thank goodness, showed me how to fix that. So I knew how to fix them really quickly. But what I started doing was adding a little bit of hot glue to where the metal meets the wood on each side of the clothespin to kind of delay the falling apart part of it. And then I also had a backup set of clothespins. So when I would do this once in the beginning of the year, right? I would make 2 sets. And then I would keep that backup set in a milk jug that I had cut the top off of. And anytime one of my students lost, I can't tell you the number of times we actually lost these clothespins because some kids would put them in their pocket or they would just disappear. I would put a new one out for them. So hopefully they didn't go through more than 2 in a year. That was about the norm in our class because at some point they would get lost. Then, when you're dismissing them from centers, just like I talked about before, they're going to come up, they're going to choose their center, get their clothespin, and I'm going to remind them, remember, as we're going, oh, look, there's 2 clips at the Dramatic Play Center now. There's room for 4 more. You can even turn it into a math problem. How many more spaces do we have? And when the clips are full, right, there's 6 spots in the Dramatic Play and there's 6 clothespins there or clips, then I'm going to say, oh, all 6 clothespins are there, but now you have to have a backup plan because there's going to be some kids who are like, oh, so now we're going to get out the checklist. It's usually just a small clipboard with a piece of paper on it, maybe some lines, and a pencil. So when you go to centers today, remember to look at the clothespins, and if there's no circles left, no dots for you, write your name on the waiting list, okay? So it takes a little time to do that. So you're going to eat some time up. I have little name cards they can use. They're found in a couple different parts of the classroom. They're going to write their name and going to keep watch there, right? Sometimes I would have my assistant kind of watch over the clipboard and she would say, okay, Jessica just left the Dramatic Play Center. I'm crossing her name off. I wonder who's next. And she holds it up, points around. It's Ashley's turn. Ashley, it's your turn to go to the Dramatic Play Center. Things like that work really well as well. Now, the one thing I do want to point out to this caller is that she said she has ages 3 to 5 in her classroom. So when it comes to clothespins, it might be a little tricky for your 3s because they don't really have, most 3-year-olds, the fine motor strength to open and close a spring-loaded clothespin. So in that case, I've seen other teachers use library pockets for the exact same reason. So they take a library pocket. I would attach it to a piece of poster board again, like I said with the dots, just because it needs to be sturdy and library pockets themselves aren't super sturdy. So I would attach it to the piece of poster board and I would write the name of the center on there or something and then laminate it and put it at the center with some dots too to let them know, how many can go in this center. And now they have, instead of a clothespin, they have a popsicle stick, like a craft stick. I do the same thing, write the kid's name on it, put the sticker on it, put the tape on it. And now they grab their stick and they go to the center and they stick it in the library pocket, right? Same thing, but much easier for your 3s. I've seen a lot of teachers use that method with great success. Just know that sometimes because these little cards get used so much, when I used the cards and the stickers with the clothespins, I had to replace the cards mid-year. That's how much use they get. If you use the pockets, I would also kind of assume that you would need to replace those at least once during the year because they rip. Even if you laminate them, they still might rip because kids are pulling their popsicle sticks in and out of them a lot, right? Especially if you have 2 classes. So I used to replace my cards mid-year every year because they would get gross. So I hope that you, the viewer, and our caller got some ideas that you can take away and use in your classroom. That's all for now. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Levin. If you think these videos are valuable, you have got to come check out the Teaching Trailblazers program. Teaching Trailblazers is the place for teachers like you to get the professional development resources and support you need to thrive. It's where you can learn relevant, life-changing best practices with professional development created specifically around the challenges early childhood teachers face. It's where you can get access to a complete research-based pre-K curriculum that you can use either to supplement your existing curriculum or use on its own to get 100% of your students kindergarten ready by the end of the year. And it's where you can hang out and connect over all things early childhood with other teachers just like you and me. It's my favorite place on earth, and it will change your teacher life, I guarantee it. Come join us at teachingtrailblazers.com to get more information and apply today. That's teachingtrailblazers.com. I can't wait to see you there.